Is there such a thing as too much luck? Is there such a thing as too much fun? Messing around, wondering how it's taken so long. I'm really so strong. It's not too much at all.
Hello, everybody. We are all about new blueprints for the new world here at Too Much. And today we are focusing on a new blueprint for education. It's not that new, it's been around for a long time, but we're going to talk about why it feels new and why it's timely for the times that we live in. So I am here with the dean of my alma mater, NYU Gallatin. Welcome, Dean Victoria Rosner.
Thank you. It is so great to be here with you, Denise.
I am so excited to have you and to share why I love Gallatin so much and why it's really informed my life, but also I think just the era that we are living in, it is really primed for what feels like a higher education market that feels less and less relevant to the job market and why Gallatin is so different. And so let me tell you a little bit about Dean Rosner. Victoria Rosner is the dean of the NYU Gallatin School of Individualized Study and professor of humanities and English. Her books include Machines for Living, Modernism in Domestic Life, Modernism in the Architecture of Private Life, and The Global and the Intimate, Feminism in Our Time. She is co-editor of Gender and Culture, the preeminent book series on literature and gender published by Columbia University Press, as well as founding co-editor of the web-based archive Pioneering Women of American Architecture, a project that recovers the histories of U.S. women architects born before 1940 and which received the Docomomo 2022 Advocacy Award of Excellence. Rosner's work has been supported by the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Graham Foundation for Advanced Studies in Fine Arts, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, and the Columbia University Center for the Study of Social Difference. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now we know a little bit about your bio and the work that you've done. What drew you to be dean at Gallatin?
So I would say that my own work and research, as you described, has been interdisciplinary from its origins when I was a graduate student in English at Columbia, lo these many years ago. And I was working on modernism, which is to say literature and culture between the two world wars. And I realized that modernism wasn't confined to literature. It was in architecture, it was in design, it was in dance, it was in music, it was in visual arts. And that to really study this aesthetic construct, I needed to be following those paths. But the academy didn't really lend itself to that kind of study because it was organized by discipline. So one place if you want to study literature, another building if you want to do architecture, another if you want to do visual art. And that just seemed really false to my object of study. So I persevered. I walked over to the architecture building. I found people to work with. I figured it out. But ever since that time, I've really been dedicated to the value of interdisciplinary study, and especially its appeal as a model for problem solving in the real world. When I learned about Gallatin, a school that figured this out more than 50 years ago, it was like an incredible discovery for me. And it is just such a privilege to have the chance to support this kind of very, very innovative academic community.
Gallatin is the NYU's best kept secret. Like that's sort of how it felt when I was applying to college. I knew I wanted to go to NYU. Originally, I wanted to go to Tisch because I thought I wanted to be an actor. And my parents were like, absolutely not. You are not. That is a plan B. You are not going to acting school. And so honestly, at the time, it was like the era when the Olsen twins had been going to Gallatin. So I had learned about Gallatin through them. So I started to research it. And then I was like, you know what? This is it. I said, I'm going to spite my parents because I can go to Gallatin. I can take classes at Tisch. I can take classes at Stern because this is the perk of Gallatin is you can take classes at all the other schools and you create your own concentration and you get credit for individualized study and internships. And so for me, I was like, this is perfect because I can do exactly what I want to do anyways, but this will appeal more to their sensibility. And what I didn't know when I made that sort of intuitive choice was that Gallatin was actually the perfect place for me. Like tenfold. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a multidisciplinary person. I've had such a crazy career of changing industries. And Gallatin really exposed me to a way of thinking that has informed my whole career.
That is so wonderful to hear. And I have to say that to me, the Gallatin alums are the best proof of concept that we have because they feel that the school was such an accelerator for them and they are doing such incredible, creative, path breaking, necessary work in the world. I'm very proud of the way that Gallatin students helps people bridge from college into professional lives. And in the world now where people are pivoting in their professional identities and there's a rapid pace of change,
Mm-hmm.
I think a Gallatin education is really the best preparation to thrive in that environment. And it sounds like you're proof of that.
Yeah, I started working full time my senior year in college while finishing up school, like late night classes and few classes. And my best friend from high school she'd gone to Princeton, but she couldn't get a job for 8 months after graduation. And I remember being like, I'm already full time employed. Granted, I was living in New York, but at the same time, I was like, here's someone who has this Ivy League degree, which is supposed to be this path to employment. And yet, I was employed and she wasn't. And I sat there being like, I think really what we're looking at is at that point, that's 15 years ago, a gap in what academia is supposed to do, which is not only like prepare us for critical thinking, but prepare us to get a job in the real world. And I started to see that gap that long ago. And now that widened. And the reason I think Gallatin is a model for the future is largely because it teaches you to know that skills are translatable. Because when you're in a class, everyone is creating their own concentration. Everyone has to figure out how this class they're taking applies to the work they're doing. And I remember when I was producing events in nightlife and then I wanted to be a TV producer. And one of my dear friends was like, you're not going to do that. Like, how are you going to possibly do that? You've never worked in TV. And I was like, babe, producing's producing's producing. Like, it's just like different line items in the budget. It's the same thing. And then I got a TV producing job and she was like, what? And I was like, that is Gallatin.
I think that Gallatin students, they come to us often as entrepreneurs, as independent thinkers, but we really encourage those skills. We teach them how to construct their own concentrations. In other words, figure out the ideas and the fields of study that really matter to them and put them together in a way that's specific to the person. And then we teach them how to navigate this complicated environment of NYU and New York City and to do it with a lot of initiative and a lot of confidence. And those are just extremely, extremely valuable skills to take forward into the workplace. And then at the same time, we have the fundamentals of a liberal arts education. So we're also teaching critical thinking, right? We're also
Mhm.
teaching analysis. We're also teaching ethics and civic engagement. So you get both that help transitioning to life after college and this deep immersion in a world of thought.
Yeah. And as the world becomes more and more, there's a lot of fear around the world becoming more AI friendly. There is this fear that a lot of these entry level jobs are going to disappear, that a lot of these sort of formulaic jobs will become redundant. And really, the future of the economy, I believe, is going to rely in resilient people with a clear point of view, which is why I think this model is the most timely it could ever be in the 50 years it's existed.
I really agree. We're going to spend the hour agreeing with each other because I also think that the Gallatin model was really prescient. It was really ahead of its time, and at this moment, it feels more valuable than ever. It's not just an intuition that you have. This year, Gallatin had 93% of its graduates employed or in graduate school within 6 months of graduation, which was a really
That's a crazy percentage.
impressively high number, but it's an artifact of the work that we do with students. I went to an Ivy League school when I was in college, and I said to my professors, what should I major in? How should I be thinking about my future? And the line then was, don't think about your future. Choose a major that interests you and just do that, and the future will take care of itself. So I majored
Interesting.
in comparative literature
Mhm.
because I like to read novels. And I graduated and I fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
I really had no plan. I had no way forward. I had a real crisis of confidence. And it's important to me. I see now in retrospect that in addition to just being kind of bad advice, it was
Mm,
also very elitist advice because it assumed that there was going to be no pressure on me after graduation to have a livelihood.
yeah.
And that's maybe the history of elite higher education, but it's not the world we live in now. And it's not something that I want to be telling to students. I want to tell students that you can both have a really educationally meaningful experience and think about your future and plan for your future. You can do both.
I had never thought about that, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that do graduate with a deep crisis of confidence because they come out and they've not been prepared at all to then take what they've been doing and translate it to the real world. And I feel like just because I started working full time my senior year of school, like I skipped that. I was just like, oh, I'm working now. I went from being in school to working with no gap. So
Well, you know, because you're a Gallatin alum, that when our school was founded, we weren't called the Gallatin School. We were called the University Without Walls. And
mhm,
that's because one of the convictions that our founders had was that education shouldn't just take place in an ivory tower, shouldn't just take place in a classroom, but students really need to be getting out into the world and having experiences, whether that's taking the form of internship or field work or research. So much is possible in New York City, but that kind of engagement is also really basic to our model.
well, I think the idea that a lot of other universities require you to come into school and declare your major freshman year, which is how do you even know what you, I mean, I'm a great example. I walked in thinking I wanted to be an actor, took a character acting class at Tisch my first semester and was like, wait, I don't think I've been acting my whole life, but I realized I was like, I don't think I want to do that. I found some resistance around memorizing monologues and I was like, I think I just want to play myself. And that's when I was like, I don't know what that means, but I do know I want to do this. And so I changed my whole college experience from what I thought it was going to be to then me immersing myself in fashion in Manhattan, which I also don't work in now. But there was a such a grand space for curiosity in a way that I could explore fashion to the depths that I did. And it really wasn't just about fashion, it was about cultural signifiers. But knowing the framework of Gallatin, I could see beyond the thing that I was studying and how it interplayed into a larger conversation. And I do think university should be a place to explore, to be curious, while also having the realistic side of like, how is that going to employ me? But I think when you're pigeonholed into one major at a very young age, you're actually not allowing yourself the breath to really figure out what lights your heart up.
I mean, I would say that in addition to what you're speaking about, the process, the way that a Gallatin education asks of students to sit and think carefully about what matters to them
Yeah.
and what they want to study, as opposed to choosing a major from a list. And look, that system works very well for a lot of people, and it's fine. Not everything in higher education needs to be uniform. It's great for
Yeah.
students to have alternatives. But I think that the way that we ask students to really, contemplate, have an idea about what they're interested in, take classes, prove out those convictions, think about their own personal experiences and histories and how those interact with the things that they want to study and the kinds of changes they want to make in the world. That process of searching is very, very important to to the final product, to the nature of a Gallatin education. It's hard work. It
Yeah.
asks more of students than a traditional education that's defined by a major. It is easier to pick a major from a list and follow the recipe for that major than it is to do this work. To do, as you know, Gallatin students all have a one-on-one faculty mentor who is their partner and interlocutor and conversational guide in the process of developing the concentration. That's a lot of effort, but I think you kind of get out of the process what you put into it.
Yeah. So, how is Gallatin continuing to push the boundaries of academia?
Um, well, I mean, it's one of the things I love about Gallatin is that it's the nature of our school that we are always changing. We are always evolving. We have certain traditions that are very dear to us, and our values stay the same, but we are always thinking about how do we serve students. So there are many, many things happening right now. This year, we launched what we are now calling our first year student experience, because in addition to the individualized path that our students follow, we also want them to have a strong sense of community and form bonds with their peers. So we put students in peer groups when they arrive, and they meet with that group every other week for the whole year. They do excursions together, social things. People come in from across the university and visit those advising groups. And the idea there is to have not just the vertical bond of student to professor, but also the lateral bonds of peers to peers, because we think often that fellow students can be your best guide to an
Yeah.
education. So that's an exciting thing that we're doing this year. We are also thinking about, we have this amazing physical space for Gallatin. We have our own building on the corner at 1 Washington Place, on the corner of Washington Place and Broadway. It is an extraordinary asset. And over the decades, as our students' interests have grown and changed, I would say we are asking more of our home. So we are going to be breaking ground to create an enormous student makerspace. So many Gallatin students are inventors and crafters, and we want them to be able to do rapid prototypes. And if they're fashion students like you, we want them to be able to produce garments for the Gallatin Student Fashion Show. We want them to have those spaces for creativity. We're going to have a student art gallery and an art gallery on Broadway. So lots and lots of spaces for creation and invention are coming that are going to support our mission, I think, beautifully.
Awesome.
So those are two examples.
I love it. I was such an experiential learner, which is why Gallatin really worked well for me because I interned a lot. I really feel like I grew so much as a human being by being able to immerse myself in work-like environments and individualized study. That was really crucial for me. But everyone has a different way of learning. And so can you talk to us about how Gallatin supports the customization of education?
Sure. It really begins the day, well, even before you arrive at Gallatin, we're sending you surveys and asking you what you're interested in and helping you to pick classes that align with your interests. And you're taking your first year interdisciplinary seminars. And then in dialogue with your advisor and by constellating a curriculum from the biggest private university in the United States, you begin to refine and grow your interests. And students end up with concentrations that are absolutely as individual as they are. I'll give you a couple of examples of recent student concentrations. The social determinants of science, social medicine, and scientific epistemology. That's one. Another one that a student did recently, fashion, culture, and editorial strategy. Another, conceptions of the self and community in digital space. So to me, each of these concentrations is like a jewel. Each contains a world. And we ask students to talk about their concentrations and explain them. And the more they do that, the clearer they get about their point of view and about the values and ideas that they think are really important. We also run seminars on things like marketing your Gallatin degree. So how do I talk about my concentration in a way that's going to take me out into the world? We give students the opportunities to share their ideas with each other. So I think we're always trying to strike this balance between customization, right? That each concentration is specific to the student, and community. How do we bring this community of individuals into collaboration and conversation with one another? And we do that through a really, really robust calendar of events. Last night, Denise, I went to 3 Gallatin events in one day. That's a
Booked and
lot even for
busy.
me. But I went to the NYU Humanities Center because we always have a lot of Gallatin faculty who are fellows at the Humanities Center, and that was a delight. And then in our current gallery, we had the opening of our annual MA show. So our MA students, not all of whom are artists. There are some who are historians and sociologists, but all of whom are participating in this great gallery exhibition that shows the work of their theses. And then I went to a dinner for Gallatin Fellowship in Human Rights, because we have students who are going to be working on human rights organizations at partner organizations around the world. So they're going to South Africa and they're going to England and they're going to the Bronx, and they'll be working on, a whole range of human rights issues. So that's our research focus. And all of it you see is totally customized.
Yeah.
All of it centers the individual, but the individual in community.
I think that's really the key, right? Is to own your autonomy, your point of view, while knowing that we are all interdependent. What was so fun about going to class was that, it sort of feels like an SNL skit sometimes. Like you go to class and everyone's going around and telling their concentration, and it's as cuckoo as you can imagine. Mine was clothing as culture. You have like the pursuit of
I
happiness
don't
over
think that's so,
here.
but
Yeah.
okay.
I just think it's like, like it's not what people are used to. So if you come in
It's a
as
lot
like a
of diversity,
voyeur,
a lot of diversity, right?
yeah, you come in as a voyeur. Like if my dad liked to say he really respected my education, but he also said like you just majored in a bunch of crap, and I was like, well,
Oh,
That's your
thanks, Dad.
opinion.
Thanks for
Um,
that.
I know exactly. I was like, thank
But I
you.
bet he's very proud of you now.
Yeah. Well, he also means that in like a loving way because it was just so he was like, got an MBA. He's very traditional. Like it's very
Oh,
different. It was such like an outlier choice in my family narrative. But like if my dad were to watch everyone going around saying their concentration, his mind would be blown because it's so not normal for him. But I think
right.
what was so magical about it was that you're all in this class and say the class was about, I don't know, let's just pick a class topic. Let's just say gender studies, for example. Let's just say it's a gender studies class. And everyone goes around and has their concentration. You have to figure out how this class applies to what you are
That's right.
majoring in,
That's
which
right.
requires a level of connective thinking, translatable skill sets. And in the world we live in now is probably the most important function to learn how to be nimble and pivot quickly in a world that is rapidly changing with less professional stability. You have to know how to connect point A to point B. And that's exactly what you have to do in every single class at Gallatin.
Yes, and I think, I mean, I can speak about my own class that I teach at Gallatin, but I really make a point of constantly toggling between theory and practice, between encountering really interesting ideas and really challenging books, and then taking those ideas and testing them in real world contexts. And I think that is a really characteristic of the Gallatin experience as well.
Well, that's cool. Can you give me a bit of an example? I'm so curious about this.
Sure. So the class that I teach at Gallatin these days is called Philanthropy and Civic Engagement. It starts from the premise that giving, charitable giving, is just such a fundamental aspect of human experience, obviously going back thousands of years, but also takes a very specific form in the United States, where it really got going in a big way in the 19th century when we began to see the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few very successful industrialists who then began thinking about how did they want to take their wealth and invest it in
Yes.
this still kind of new country. So we start by reading Andrew Carnegie, who built public libraries all over the country, including the one where I really found myself as a reader as a young girl. And then we follow that history of philanthropy up till the present day, where we see the tech billionaires who have also gathered extraordinary wealth in this country and thinking about how to turn it to social purpose and what that looks like. So we do that reading, and we also read literature, George Orwell, Virginia Woolf, and I raise money for the class so that students can actually have the experience of philanthropic giving. And every semester we give away usually around $50,000 to $60,000, a lot of money. And the students make all the decisions about how to do that. I teach them how to do it. I teach them how to develop mission statements, how to identify effective nonprofit organizations, how to read their balance sheets, how to evaluate their efficacy. What are different models for doing that? Students go on site visits to organizations. They do this working in teams, so they have to
Mm.
collaborate. And then at the end of the semester, we have a very, very long debate, usually on the weekend when we have a lot of time. And students have to decide make really difficult choices about how to invest our class funds. I tell students on the first day in a normal college class, what's the outcome? What's at stake? You learn a little bit more, you learn less, you get a better grade or worse grade. But in our class, the decisions that you make are actually going to have
Wow.
impact in the real world. And it's a responsibility that the students take very seriously. And I love to watch them struggle with that responsibility, come out the other side. So that
This
to
is
me is a kind of duality that inheres in Gallatin classes between theory and practice.
I love that. That's such an amazing class.
Thank you. Well,
I feel like
come
I
visit
want to take
us.
that class.
Come on, come in September.
So cool. But this is the point, right? Like preparing people for what the responsibility is to be a citizen in the world beyond graduation, beyond your individual interests. I do think we're living at a time where we have to think more interdependently and use our brain for good. There's a lot of systems collapsing. So how do we build something more beautiful in its place? Which is like why I started this podcast was I was like, we need new blueprints. What's happening? We're hitting this tipping point and we need to see where the aggregated knowledge exists, like who are building these new systems so that we can implement them so that we are in a less complicated world. That's my hope.
I agree.
So As you do, we're entering what I think is maybe one of the worst job markets since 2008 for university students. I mean, great percentage, 93%, amazing percentage. But how are you preparing this set of students for what is sort of unprecedented new challenges that haven't really existed for, this age group in the same way? There's been financial shifts or less of a opportunity, but there hasn't really been this idea where certain jobs are going to become redundant. There's going to be less entry level jobs. And so, can you explain to me how you guys are thinking about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would say that I think our students are very, very well prepared for the current job market, and for all the reasons you mentioned, because they graduate with much more real world experience than a typical college student, because they have a clear sense of what they want to do and how to pursue it, because we've taught them how to self advocate and how to show initiative and how to make a plan and carry it out. I would say one of the areas that we're really emphasizing is giving additional support
Mhm.
around this to our faculty.
Yeah.
So we held a faculty lunch session just last week called Academic Advising in the Age of the Job Apocalypse, which is a word I just learned.
Okay. That might be I'm going to use that now.
Yeah, it's good. And, talking to faculty and helping them to understand they're all experts in their subject matter, but can we help them articulate where are the transferable skills in their classes? And can they call that out for their students? Can they call that out for their advisees and help them understand how the ways in which a Gallatin education is helping to propel you towards your future as a graduate? So training the faculty on that, educating the faculty on that is very, very important. For the students, we do so much, obviously, to give them the kinds of experiences, including internships, and we have many more different kinds of opportunities for internships than a traditional college, including internships that are embedded in courses that students can sign up for, summer projects of all kinds. And so students graduate with a more extensive resume than you would typically see. And that is a big way that students move forward and find their first jobs. We also, as I mentioned, teach them how to talk about their Gallatin
Yeah.
education, because our model is not always well understood, but when people find out about it, they want to talk about it. When they see these interesting concentrations on students' resumes, they say, "What is this? What were you studying in college?" And that's the beginning of a great conversation, because students are experts in their work. And that is also something that's going to help them to write an application letter that's going to get attention. So between the combination, taking that degree out turning that degree into a story that you can tell to potential employers, drilling down on your transferable skills, and gathering all of this experiential learning, we think we have a formula that can stand up to the current job market, and our students show us that it's working.
Totally. I've noticed just from my understanding of the data and my own personal experience around the Gen Z generation is that there is a level of comfort that's very different than my generation around being behind the screen. So when I got my first internship, it was because I left my dorm and walked 15 minutes to their office and handed in my resume because I was like, they're not picking up my phone calls, they're not answering my email. I'm going to go walk to. Back then, it was also a little. There was the doorman let me right up. There was no. What are you doing here? And I was like, okay. It was also that level of just
Informality.
false confidence. Also, like I was a
Mhm.
very very ambitious 18-year-old and was very
Right.
unafraid because I just felt like I had, what am I going to lose? I got nothing to lose. So
Exactly.
such a different energy. But I've noticed now there's a lot from what I hear from my friends who have kids or stepkids or just, my own interns, there's like a reticence of going for it. And I understand that Gallatin students are very, at their core, they're self-driven. They're going to a school of individualized study. There's an internal engine that exists already. But I wonder if there's anything that's happening generationally where you do have to train them a bit to show up or go in person or call, because I think there's a level of like, we're just going to email. If I don't hear back, I'm just like letting it go, or I'm going to DM, they didn't respond. And I'm like, you're in the city, like go knock on doors, go get what you want and figure it out, because you don't always get a response online.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely see what you're saying, and I think we both know there's been some really compelling research about the impact of so much technology and so many screens on young people as they're developing. And that is something that we're really thinking about, not just at Gallatin, but at all of NYU. How do we get students to put down some of their screens and interact in real life in a way that is going to challenge, I think, what you're describing as a kind of passivity that could perhaps be inculcated by the consumption of technology
Yeah.
and just scrolling. So a lot of faculty are talking, myself included, are talking about having classroom policies that we don't use screens in class.
Yeah.
We're obviously
Love that.
talking about how to help students navigate the advent of generative AI. We're talking about in our first year experience, when students first transition to college, that can be a moment for habit resets and
Hmm.
to engage students in a conversation about whether they feel that their use of technology is healthy and supportive of their well-being. And when you ask students those questions, they will be honest and they will tell you, I don't feel great about how much time I spend on my phone. I don't think that it's really serving me well. But on their own as a single person, it's hard to step out of those molds.
Yeah.
Collectively, with the support of a peer group and some guidance, it is much more possible to do. So I think that's an area where we have the
Mm.
opportunity to give students some really useful guidance and support.
We've had a few AI experts on the podcast, researchers, and it's been interesting to hear their takes on how to implement it. And everyone has a different understanding of what are the best practices. But at the core, a lot of them are saying, like, to actually create critical thinking, which is going to be essential to your career moving forward, you have to eliminate it from the classroom initially and then reintroduce it maybe second semester or later. So there's a level of thinking that happens without it. Because I've noticed just in my own personal experience, like there is a deep reliance on it from these younger generations. And I worry for them just because I'm like, if you are using that at the core time of developing your brain and your thinking capacity, you're going to end up hindering your own opportunity and potential. But what's hard about AI is that until we have a consensus on the ethics of AI and how to use it, it's really turning, once again, a classic American way as an individual responsibility of how you wield it. And so I wonder, is the university, I'm sure the university is talking about all of this, but what is the thoughts around how you're going to work with AI?
I mean, one of the things that's been, because we've had many, many conversations within the Gallatin faculty about AI, many different kinds of seminars. So, I mean, I think one of the things that really struck me was the high proportion. I think it's 80% of high school students who say that they use AI for their schoolwork. 80%. And then you ask those same high school students, how much guidance have you gotten from your teachers and mentors about how to use AI well? And the answer is close to zero,
Yeah.
right? That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
That's a problem. I think we need to do better than that for our young people. I think they're expecting to get guidance
Yeah.
from their professors and from their mentors and their teachers, and we have to show up for them for that.
Yeah.
So we are working at Gallatin to make that a reality, even as I don't think it's the goal to have every classroom treat AI in the same way.
Yeah.
We're going to have classrooms at Gallatin where students need to be using AI and
Yeah.
working in AI, and perhaps it's even the topic of the class. And then we may have classes where there's really no role for it at all. And faculty need to thoughtfully determine an approach and a policy that's right for them and right for their pedagogy and right for their subject matter. What we can't do is ignore the fact that it is a real presence in our students'
Yeah.
lives.
You can actually expand neural capacity if used correctly. I'm not like anti AI, but I think
Nope.
we have to get on board with like, what is the ethical way of using this and how are we making sure that people are still thinking? There's a lot of things that there's ripple effects to a decline in literacy. There's ripple effects to a decline in critical thinking that affect our government, our communities, our sense of self. And so I'm very big on like, how do you wield it in a way that makes sense? And I think we still really don't know. And I'm learning from these experts on this podcast all the time. But when I use it as a thought partner. I don't use it to think for me.
But I think that, for young people who are entering college now, we need to teach them how to use it in a way that feels healthy and supportive and responsible, and
Yeah.
not for, what is the horrible phrase, cognitive offloading,
Yes.
just to
Yeah.
say, just having a machine do the thinking for you. I
I'm
think, again, the way that we're fortunate at Gallatin is that no one comes to Gallatin because they want an easy
right.
path or they want to coast through their or sleep through their education. No
Right.
one would come here for that. Come here to be challenged and exhilarated and thrilled and go on a voyage of self-discovery and learn more about the world. No one comes here to coast.
Yeah.
It's just
There's
not that kind of place.
a fervor for learning. We like to learn at Gallatin,
Exactly.
lifelong
Exactly.
learners.
That's totally right. Including the alums, right? The alums to go to alumni college.
My job now is basically in school. I get to read books, interview cool people. Like
You're
all I
doing
do
research,
is
right?
learn and research, and it's delightful. I'm having
Fantastic.
the time of my life.
Perfect
But
Gallatin student.
yeah. So what do you think other academic institutions that don't aspire to be a Gallatin, what are some things you think they could borrow from Gallatin?
Right. So I think for a lot of schools, the individualized concentration feels like a very big lift or really radical change. It means taking apart academic departments and, things, really giant steps like that. But there are many, many elements of a Gallatin education that I think are just sort of best practices, or we call them high impact practices. The experiential learning is one of them, helping students to get real world, hands on kinds of experiences. The focus on research. This year, we introduced a whole new suite of courses at Gallatin that are our undergraduate research courses, where students are doing hands-on primary research in their classes. And that is certainly a best practice. The very intentional ways that we go about building community, through events and supporting students' curiosity. These are all things that serve students so well, and that I think other institutions can adopt in ways that feel right for them and appropriate to their context, their cultural context.
I definitely like this idea of here's theory and here's practice. That's what a lot of other, whether or not they take the Gallatin model with a grain of salt, for other academia institutions, we need to be helping students figure out how to live in a world that is complicated but also really expensive. Like really expensive. At the core of it, people have to somehow pay rent, right? I'm always like, how are we preparing people to pay their bills? And so the idea of like theory, practice, and figuring out what do you love, how do you translate that into the real world, and how do you make a living doing what you like in the real world, right? That's another variable in question I think Gallatin's very good at.
Or here's another way to think about it, right? You said that when you started school, you wanted to be an actor. We have a theater at Gallatin. And if you come to Gallatin and you're interested in acting, you won't just have the opportunity to get on a stage and act. You'll also have the opportunity to direct, produce, learn how to run the light board or the sound board in our theater, be part of the production team, be a dramaturg, right? So we really believe in a kind of wraparound experience and having students play different roles, and so that they can understand how the
Mhm.
whole comes together. I think it's characteristic of what we call the Gallatin Interdisciplinary Arts Program.
Yeah. That's a great point because a lot of people, like for me, when I worked in fashion, I loved clothing and I realized through working in fashion, I didn't love the business of fashion. And so then it was like, this is not the right fit for me. But it's like we learn so much from learning what we don't like. I think it
Yep.
really helps us point us in the right direction because a field that we enjoy is so expansive. There's so many roles you can play in one pillar. So how do you narrow down what is the right job and role for me in this zone of genius? And we can be very close. Like we can be working in our zone of genius, but we're adjacent to our purpose, you know? And it's like,
Yep.
how do we get to the bullseye in the target?
Yeah, and a lot of as you said, a lot of that can be by process of elimination.
Yeah.
So that's why students have the opportunity at Gallatin to go across all the schools of NYU. And is it a public policy approach that interests you? Is it an arts and sciences approach? Is it an engineering approach? You can look at these things from so many different perspectives and see what you really connect with, what feels authentic and compelling for you. And that's another thing that I would love to see higher education absorb more fully, is really letting students have the chance to explore and discover and find their way. I think
Yeah.
that is really what education at its core should be.
Yeah, especially because no one's staying in a job for 30 years now. It's very rare. I have just had a Bob Hutchins AI expert on the podcast, and he went and got a PhD after running a massive digital market agency for 20 years because he was wanted to learn more about AI and apply a sensibility to that. And so he got a whole new degree, later in life, which I was like, that's an example of a Gallatin mindset, which is you pivot, you expand your skill set to do the next thing. Life is a series of chapters. We're not fixed. And I think Gallatin gives you a lot of permission to be many things.
Yes, a lot of support for that. And we see that sometimes with lifelong learners, not just in our bachelor's program, but in our master's program, who come back because they have a passion project that they want to pursue and explore. And we find a space to help them put together a program to do that. And that's wonderful to see, because sometimes these are things they've been waiting to do for decades, for their whole lives. And when they finally get the chance to do it, it's like a blossoming. It's really, really extraordinary.
So before we wrap up here, will you let me know what you want your legacy at Gallatin to be?
I have to laugh because that really sounds like I'm dead.
I just launched this workbook, Tools to Help People Build a Life They Love. One of the exercises is writing out what you want your legacy to be, largely because it helps you identify the steps to living deeper in purpose, right? To actually know where you're headed to leave the world or your career in the place you want to leave it to. So I asked that not as not as like a you're dead, but I asked that in a what is the footprint you're trying to create? What is your unique spin and why you became dean at Gallatin? What are you trying to instill in the university?
Well, I would say that one through line that runs through my whole career as an educator from before I came to Gallatin, and I hope I've brought it here with me, is a desire to make higher education more welcoming to all different kinds of students. I think when I went to school, there was very much an idea that there was like one way to be smart and one way to be a good student.
Mm,
And I don't believe that,
mhm.
I believe that human beings are in the main curious and that we have an intrinsic drive to learn and to grow and to develop. And it's up to educators to support that and help those students find a path forward. So, I've worked to think about how we can make our educational structures more inclusive and more welcoming. And I love supporting that work. At Gallatin inherently is a place that will adapt to meet a student where they are. And to me, that is absolutely a key direction for higher education. And I want to continue to support that work here. I also think that it's been in the nature of higher education. A lot of these institutions have been around for not just decades, but hundreds of years. They can be sometimes a little bit resistant to change. One of the things I love about Gallatin is that it has an inherent flexibility because it has to meet every student where that student starts. And I really want to support healthy change and growth and development at Gallatin. So
I
those
love
are two
that.
things that I hope I bring to the school.
I think that's so awesome. We have to stay flexible. I feel like sometimes the institutions can't get out of their own way. And we have to be willing to try things and fail to make this world meet the demands of what's coming and the people. And so that's so cool.
I totally agree. And I say this to students all the time. I say a couple of things to students all the time, but one of them is this is a safe place for you to fail. And if you're never failing, you're not taking enough risks. You're not stretching, you're not pushing yourself enough. So come fail at Gallatin. And
Or fail
then
post Gallatin like me. You
let us,
just
I
it's
don't know about
okay.
that. Denise.
It's all
Let
good.
us help you see what's on the other side of that and what's actually possible for you. I always say to students, I will say it to them at graduation this year, you are capable of so much more than you know, but the only way to find out is to try to do something that you don't necessarily think you can do.
Mhm. I would say, even if you fail, you learn so much in the process and you learn so much about yourself, and it's always worth the swing. And if you have a long career, I always quote Twyla Tharp on this podcast, the long career, you have a lot of misses and you have a lot of wins. And that's what a creative career is. That's what an entrepreneurial career is you can't expect to always knock it out the park.
I'm thinking that we need to recruit you for our alumni mentoring program. Are you doing the alumni mentoring program?
I am not on the mentoring program. I would love to. I actually, I taught at NYU LA one summer, and I just
Okay.
told Leisha, who works at Gallatin, I want to do a workbook workshop with my new workbook in the fall. But I love what Gallatin did for me and allowed me to be fully myself. And I learned so much by having the freedom to explore and be self-directed. And it was something I think I'd been waiting for my entire life. Like I couldn't wait to get to New York when I was in high school. It was like, got to get to New York, got to get to New York. And then when I got to New York, I was like, I'm finally here. I get to be who I want to be. And I just took full advantage. Like I started interning my freshman year of school. I got all these like next level internships. Like I worked at Nylon Magazine. I worked for Pat Field on Sex and City 2. I had these crazy experiences as a very young person that allowed me to learn a lot about myself and get really clear a lot quicker than I would have otherwise. But I took a lot of big swings at that time, and I don't think I would have felt as confident to do that if I wasn't in a structure that supported that kind of thinking.
I think that young people today, even more, really need mentors to help them feel enfranchised to take those kinds of risks.
Yeah. No, that we do. We need people just to be a little cringy. I'm like, I look back at some of the things I did in my 20s. I'm like, so cringe, so cringe. Granted, it wasn't on Instagram because we didn't have Instagram.
Right? There's no record, no traces remain, and that's a gift.
Some very bold emails. And you know what? I love that for myself. I definitely had the confidence of a mediocre white man in my like my 18 to 21. I
Oh,
was like,
that's a lot of confidence.
I was like confident. And I'm trying to channel in a more polished, more refined way that sort of energy because I just was really fearless that over time, life and your career sort of beats you down, it shapes you. And I just think there's no better time to get away with that level of boldness than at that age because you're just trying to get employed and everyone understands that level of hunger and ambition and it's not judged in the same way. And so I did so many cringy things, but I stand by it because it got me employed. It got me a lot of crazy experiences. And
it
I
got
learned
you
a
the
lot.
confidence in yourself to believe that you could persevere, right? And
Yeah,
so students, I think, really need mentors to tell them, you can do this. It's going to be okay. Just keep going.
100%. And if you want to
Yeah.
go after it, that's what I say. I'm like, you take the swing.
I'm
Like you
so
just
signing you up as an alumni mentor. That's it. Your fate is sealed.
sounds good. Well, thank you so
Okay.
much for taking the time and walking everyone through
Oh,
this
it's such a pleasure.
the ethos of this podcast, which is just really exploring blueprints to help people navigate their lives. And we want, after every episode, someone to get a tinge of clarity around their own path. And so thank you for supporting that on every level.
I always say the world needs more Gallatin.
I agree.
Thanks,
Thank you, Dean
Denise.
Rosner.
Thank you so much for listening. If you do like listening, it would mean the world to us if you could subscribe or review the podcast anywhere that you watch or listen to the podcast. It really helps with the algorithm to share this with the world. I want to give a special thank you to young Spielberg and Sarah Yarkin for their beautiful work on our opening jingle, Dana Boulos for her help with the beautiful art, and to all of you for tuning in and keeping this dream alive. If you want to hear certain topics or from certain guests, please feel free to email us. We really, really want to hear from you and see how we can best support you. See you next time.